never know. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have people from Chicago and other interesting places all over everywhere. And welcome if you are new to Ollie, and welcome to so many of you that have been here before. I'm doing this course a little bit differently because I looked at evaluations. Yes, I know you don't think I do, but I do. And somebody said they wanted a break. You know, my feeling about breaks, well, not to criticize those who take the path of exit early, and I condemn you not. My heart is broken each Ollie session, but I've learned to deal with it, whatever pain you've caused me. But anyway, all of that is to say that we are now, with sadness for me, going to have a break. And Frank will administer appropriate issues in case you try to linger too long. But there is the coffee, and you can drink heavily. You could be highly
Drink heavily.
you could be highly caffeinated by 4 o'clock. I don't know about that. But basically, do you know all these years here, there's never been a break. Not since we left the museum. I know you all, you museum people will remember the break days. Yeah, those were blissful times, and I've just decided to do away with them, and now I think maybe you would be happy with your break. How long? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? Yeah, you better make it.
About 4 minutes.
All right, all right. So you'll remember that. Your urologist will thank you someday. But basically, all of that and that coffee, I can smell it. So you will enjoy this. And I do bring you a subject that really ends the term in the 11th century. And you think, God, he is so slow. Yes, I am. But I mean, that's a long time if you stop and think about it in terms of British history. Because 2025, we're going to go all the way from the Norman conquest onward, and you say, yeah, well, wake me up, when we get to William the Conqueror. But yes, there is a lot of this history that I think is interesting. And those of you, most of us, have been to the United Kingdom and appreciate the evidence of Roman civilization that is there. And of course, the remnants of what came before. Were you able to send out that Stonehenge article?
No.
Okay.
I didn't remember getting a Stonehenge article.
Oh, I thought I sent it to you.
Well.
Okay. Never mind. It appeared in the New York Times in, you saw it? Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating and so appropriate. I think it was in August, actually, when I read it. So some have seen it. And I was saying how appropriate that the study of prehistoric Britain has gone on and on. And they'll never come to a point they'll say, this is it. There's nothing more to find. It's always something, isn't it? So for those who like archaeology, there is a lot that is very, very significant. But this is history, not archaeology. So we are rather going to breeze through some of this simply because it's not my field. Not that it's not very interesting, but Romans I can really, really get concerned about. If you've seen the book or you are aware of the book that I'm using, you'll find that much of this is actually just paraphrased. And I want you to note that 90,000 square miles. And you say, well, that's not a lot. And you are quite right about that when you think about it. And that population was very limited indeed. As far as the phrase that's missing, that should read open to others. It's sort of like y'all come, and they will, all the way through the 20th century, right? I mean, the Germans being the last who attempted to conquer. But how many people, if you stop and think, if you have difficulty sleeping tonight, just count up all the different peoples who have tried to invade and take over, from the French and a variety of others that we will talk about. And of course, the fame of the British Navy. All of this is to say that the lowlands and the area that so many of us enjoy visiting, the cities in that particular part, are where the population was so great in earlier times. For example, the time that we are about to discuss. They had the natural resources, and they are not dependent on our friends that we love for the wool, the sheep. But you go north, and if you don't hear a bear, I will be very surprised. If I were a gambling man, I would go in with you, because and I know that this is very, very important. Consequently, as far as we know from the Roman sources, the southern part was the greatest occupied, and the northern part, and as far as I know, that has remained the same, except for the cities. Most of the people lived in the south. And I mean, the beaches and all the rest of it make it very, very tempting. Now, here again is more information that the book provides, and you can sort of take it or leave it, because I find much of archaeological evidence to be what I call speculative. In other words, you read one book, 1 year, then you read something different, say, well, maybe not. In other words, information is interesting, but it's not necessarily factually true, just a possibility. And nothing more so than Stonehenge. And if you have the opportunity to read that article, I thought, yet another theory about Stonehenge. And I'm thinking, really? Here it is, 2024. And people, and I guess they need to get the books out and get the tenure. We know about that. So that's very important. So think up, yeah, exactly. Think up something new. And again, it's always interesting. And Stonehenge never fails to make the news, even though when I used to take students there, and I was just going on and on about Salisbury Cathedral nearby and copies of the Magna Carta, and I said, now this is Stonehenge. And they would say, where is the shop where we get the t-shirts and postcards? And I thought, no commercial activity until you see this, because they just wanted to take a picture and leave. And they say, so, I mean, we can watch the Chevy Chase movie, right? I mean, it's like, I know you're saying, someday they will appreciate this, right? But when you're young, it's hard to see the significance, but it indicates the possibilities of a religious slash scientific slash whatever kind of edifice. And of course, we know that it has survived the test of time, Lord knows. Because we never know if it will someday be destroyed. The so-called Celtic people, and I say so-called because I think most of us understand these terms are just conveniences for, we don't know anything more because the term Celt has been, I guess, designated to refer to people who are not Germans. I mean, they are related somehow, but they are not exactly the same in terms of language. But unless you're an anthropologist slash archaeologist, I'm not sure you exactly know the differences, because if you go through and talk about their characteristics and so forth, it'll be very difficult to say, gosh, that is so different. You know, a Celt would be lost in this world. I don't know. In any event, these so-called Celts, and we see that referring to the upper class as Druids, which I think is interesting, because sometimes we see the term Druid today to refer to, I suppose, various groups. But the Druids were, as you say, a religious group. If you are familiar with the Bellini opera called Norma, you know about, oh, you didn't, the Druid priestess falls in love with a Roman, which is a no-no. You know, you say shades of Miss Saigon or that sort of thing, forbidden love, you know, that sort of thing. Maria Callas sang it. So we're not here to discuss opera. The idea, though, being, of course, if you want to believe that, the idea of like having upper classes referred to as Druids. And again, this is, I'm not sure, but I understand that is the particular spin they want to make at this time. And I thought you would particularly appreciate the last sentence here, which I'm quoting directly, maybe paraphrasing so I won't be sued. A degree of civilization perhaps not appreciated as much in the past. We think, what does that mean? It means that, in effect, that as time has gone on, people are not as willing to say, oh, the Romans, oh, they brought everything that was wonderful to the Celts. I know those poor Celts, bless their hearts. They needed, oh, and they would say, thank you, Romans. We were excited to take Latin, yes, Latin 1, Latin 2, and we owe all of it to you. And oh, and my new toga fits beautifully. Yeah, I mean, it's all of that, I think, in serious fashion, that they are not willing, the modern scholars of this are not willing to say. It's like Celtic revisionism, go Celts, go Big C. I mean, it's like we want them to get more credit perhaps than they used to, and not see them as some benighted souls who are saying, gosh, we can hardly wait to meet some civilized people who can help us with our declensions and conjugation. Remember, those of you, thank a Latin teacher, Loyola. Yeah. all of that I think is interesting in terms of what we can get from the book in terms of appreciating the descriptions of the Celts. And again, I'm quoting settled agriculture, and they're using aerial photography to kind of demonstrate Celtic agriculture and how it all worked. Skilled use of iron and all of the above does not mean that they are not still in tribes. They are illiterate and they fight amongst each other. And of course, the man, the legend. And do you think we owe the salad dressing to him? Or is that another Caesar? I've often wondered that. Caesars, there are various Caesars. You mentioned one, didn't you, Claudius? So, but Julius is the biggie. I think if you get into some sort of trivial pursuit or one of those games, to see how many people can name the greatest military figures in history, I think Julius Caesar would presumably make the top 10, right?
Top five.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let you take it outside if you all want to fight about it. But we just say he is very, very, very important and definitely a legend in his own mind. Believe me, I don't think many great people have a problem with that, like self-esteem issues with the psychology. I don't think Julius Caesar had that problem. I think he knew he was great. I don't think he knew all the high school students who would be tortured for the future because of him, but he was definitely ambitious, and his story in terms of being significant to Britain and medieval Britain as it will become is absolutely amazing. We could have a class just on Julius Caesar, let's face it. I mean, there's so much that is not included in this simply because it's not a course on Roman history. But thanks to him, and again, this may be a little unfair to the Celts, but he brings them into written history, shall we say, because of the issue of literacy and written records. The Gallic Wars, causing both sorrow and jubilation to students of Latin. You always think, well, this is my fantasy, having a student who'd say, "Sir, could we get more information about the Gallic Wars? Could we discuss them further? I don't want to do more fifth declension, please, sir." It didn't happen. It's a sick fantasy. So I'm working with a counselor about this. But you can imagine that's kind of a teaching dream. I love this map because this is one of those maps. It's like you're young and you're sort of working out and you hope to be big and strong someday. You got your empire going. And here it is, I would say, before the time of Julius Caesar. Although I guess since Gaul is included, we would have to actually say the time of Caesar, which would be, of course, the second half of the first century before Christ. What I find interesting about this is those of you familiar with the empire will realize how much more is coming and how much more that is valuable. Let's consider, for example, going east. and of course, going south, meaning Egypt and all the areas, Mesopotamia and so forth, that of course would be considered highly desirable from a point of view of economic interests or just raw power, if that's what you're into. What is interesting is, of course, we see off what many of us love, Ireland and Scotland and Wales and all the rest of it, and think, I'm not thinking that was on the top list for the Romans, like, gosh, we can hardly wait till we conquer them. Many people actually question how much people really knew about the British Isles, whether they thought they were just some mystery area. If you stop and think about it, there's no reason why the Romans would have known about that. Although some contend, which I find interesting, some contend that some non-Romans knew about them, because there's a theory that the Celts of France and the Celts of Britain were somehow related, which is an interesting idea. All of this is to say that there was no particular reason for that interest. They were very interested in Gaul. And of course, as we know, this was one of Caesar's greatest hits in terms of his conquests. How interesting it would be to go into the first triumvirate and Pompey and all the rest. But that's not our purpose here. What we do want to see is that during these campaigns, and of course, you know what we're waiting on. We're waiting on going north and dealing with those Germanic tribes and thinking, well, there's just so much we can conquer, one area at a time. It's not they weren't thinking about the big G, they were. But Celts first, we'll subdue them. He was getting, I'm sure, lots of advice from Rome, because remember, this is the late Roman Republic. Sometimes we forget that and think all he had to think about was matters military. And in fact, he had to think about basically the Republic was going to, where in a handbasket, right? And he was not exactly unhappy about that fact, because he had plans. To say that he was ambitious is quite the understatement. I find it remarkable that he did all that he did, whether it was good or not so good, but he was definitely an ambitious person. Now, where's Pompey? Where are other leaders? Oh, they're there. Don't you worry. But he was in Gaul, that is Julius Caesar, because it was significant for him to bring it under Roman control. I don't think he intended to say, I want to bring civilization to these folks. I want to help them reach out and touch. Yeah. A Celt's hand. I don't think it was any of that. I think it was basically the ambition. And I always find it interesting when you compare this to other examples of colonialism. Sometimes you think about what is the justification. And a lot of it has to do with fighting amongst the other people, the sense of pride in Rome, and of course, natural resources, which Gaul definitely had. All of that to say is that this campaign, which went on for a long, long time, as you well know, a decade. And of course, he was not always there. He had trips he had to make and had to deal with various issues. But during that time, with the decay of the Republic going strongly, he suddenly made these two remarkable trips to Britain. And that is, as far as I'm aware, our first information in writing about Celtic Britain. So that is definitely amazing when you think that's first century before Christ, when that happens. 55 and 54. And then he leaves, and that's it for a long time indeed. Now you think, well, maybe he just got bored and decided to move on. Believe me, you can go to a club of people who want to discuss this at length, serve refreshments. I mean, because there are endless speculations about the purpose of these trips and why they ended and how are they significant. Every time I read something about this, it's all, well, again, it can almost be considered as speculative as archaeology because no one will really know. I don't think anyone has come up with Julius Caesar's greatest quotations where he said, I really love being over here these two trips, but we're out of here. It's too cold. The food is horrible. Many of us have said these things before. I mean, what is that? Red bean soup or something? Blood pudding. I thought, take me back to Colonel Sanders. That's where I was young then and I ate badly. So yeah, I mean, but it's like you can't imagine why he was there in the first place. But we do know this, the first trip was quite short and very small. It was much larger the second time, but maybe he was getting sort of word from his friends in Rome that he had other things he needed to do. He made some allies because, as you know, probably from the history of colonialism in various other parts of the world by other powers, nothing the colonial power likes better than to say, we've heard about how they were ugly to you and hurt your feelings. But you know what? We love you very much. And so why don't we be friends? And then together we can beat up on the others. This strategy seems to have worked throughout history because it worked in this case. He actually allied with some of these Celtic leaders. And you're thinking, what was in it for them? Well, you're going to be a little Roman buddy, or maybe I'll give you a badge. I mean, I don't know. Many of you know about how that works. I mean, Clovis, the king of the Franks, some of you remember him from French history. I mean, he would get, I'm a friend of Rome, I heart Rome, that sort of thing. This can be very exciting if you're a little person, like a chieftain, a kinglet. We understand that. And like, yeah, they love me over there in Italy. Yeah, that sort of thing. So all of that is we don't know. The theory to me of maybe he was attempting to prevent British Celts from helping French Celts might be true. And yet I really doubt that he was thinking about, well, I can't wait to get all the resources that are here. Although they had them, but they would have required a lot of further development, shall we say, in terms of iron and copper and so forth and so on. I always wonder about that. Why would someone have thought that, especially? But after all of these chapters of Caesar's Gallic Wars, and I'm going to read you some that would have been rated R for my Latin class, but I've decided you can take it. You're old enough that you can handle it because it's a little racy, but it's okay. Okay, you can deal with it. Of course, the end of the line for Caesar's visits, because we know what happens, the Ides of March, as the Bard will tell us about. It would be interesting to recount all that history of Rome, but we'll let that go and just understand that he may have had allies, but I'm not sure what good it did them, except maybe if they had the little Roman badge. I mean, because I can't imagine anything. You can prance around during recess and say, yeah, they love me over in Rome. I mean, some Celts might be impressed for a while, but you know how that people get over it. I mean, when you do that sort of thing, because of course, we have no evidence that there were any further connections with the Roman government. There is, they say, some evidence of Celtic trade with the Romans. Not the Roman government again, but perhaps Roman businesses. Wouldn't that be interesting? But that is entirely out of anything Caesar would tell us, or as far as I'm aware, any other source. And meanwhile, I'm sure his mind had moved on because he did not leave any kind of Roman support there. He didn't attempt, which I find very interesting, since they had Gaul under Roman control. No doubt about that. But not going north, the Germans, or going west, these Celts. So that's the way it stood in 44. So that's the little bit of information we have in terms of what will become of these Celtic peoples in Britain and their Roman connection. Because as far as I'm aware, there was no other evidence of that and what they could particularly do at that time. The Gallic Wars, again, available to you on Amazon. Yes, you can get it if you prefer the unexpurgated, get it in the original Latin. What always fascinates me about it is, of course, it's a good, solid Latin. But if you're going on with Latin classes, you know it can be a little misleading. Because those of you who took a lot of Latin, you go on to a little Virgil and Ovid and say, gosh, it's all the same. No, it's not, because there's a very good reason why you do this, Caesar, in the lower Latin, and you do Cicero and all these others in the more advanced classes, because it's a lot harder. And I just note that, because not take anything away from Julius Caesar, because I think it's amazing to think this guy's conquering people and trying to take over the Roman Republic and doing all of this. And he has time at night, mind you. I mean, it's not like, yeah, I'm just taking a year off to write my memoirs. I mean, that's not true. He's, people always say, oh, I'm so stressed, I don't have time enough. Then you think, well, then go try to be like Julius Caesar or one of those. I mean, it's like, no, I think he had plenty of time and provides us with this description, which is almost anthropological in nature, because it tells us a lot about their society, at least from a Roman perspective. Because that didn't mean, it's like people always say, doesn't mean something is necessarily true. It just means that that's the way they viewed it. And the way they viewed it is that the Romans had established a king who was a Roman sycophant. But I'm sure you can find think about 19th century India, or all of the colonial places in the world, or Northern Africa, or all of those places we know where colonialism was a part of their world. You'll always find sycophants. Oh, it's so wonderful that you're here. We love you so much. I know you got some rate my coloniallord.com. I know you got a couple of bad 1 stars, but we love you. I mean, yeah, people listen to what they want to hear, right? So, chariots and warfare, I thought that was kind of interesting to think about the use of that and how that would have affected his military strategy, particularly when he went back the second time around. Trade, again, speculative, but interesting nonetheless. Have they got the list? Have they got no, but it's, how do they say, stands to reason that there were various kinds of economic relationships, but again, not government and not to be discovered, only to be assumed. Finally, on this area, I wanted to quote the most civilized is the area of Kent. Many of you have been to Kent, Canterbury, and that area, and it's a beautiful area. And Canterbury Cathedral, which was taken by Henry VIII from those Catholics, yes. And so that's a very important area, entirely maritime. So that is the area that would be of greatest significance, I would think, to Caesar and the Romans in terms of the first area they went to. In fact, the major. Now, this is, of course, a little subjective here when he speaks. Oh, I thought that was interesting. Most do not sow corn, which I thought was interesting. In other words, most of us would think about the significance, but they live on milk and flesh. Heart issues, yeah. So we're assuming that's not good. Clad with skins. Again, oh, and we love those tats. I thought that bluish color. And yeah, wear their hair long. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, can you imagine? Wow, wild stuff. Wear their hair long, shaving their body. I mean, a lot of this, 10, even 12 had wives common to them. And you're thinking, must we read all this lurid stuff? Well, believe me, the teacher would never have had us read that. Yeah. So I was protected by wholesome teachers who said, that is just rated R. But It, I thought the wives, the multiple wives, I'm thinking low red with a capital L. And salacious, yeah.
Salacious.
Nothing you need to know about, but all of this is simply to say, I mean, and of course, you are aware that Julius Caesar was not a choir boy. Okay, so it's not, but he is reporting this much like an anthropologist, it seems to me, like a Margaret Mead of the ancient world. It's like, oh, all those Samoans, they're so cool. They have so many interesting little activities, you know. But that's better than nothing, as they used to say. I mean, it's like that provides the information. And there is no source that I'm aware that would necessarily contradict him. With that, we'll take this very important break. And remember, you could drink coffee, or you could abstain,
Or you could abstain.
you could make yourself pure, you could drink water.
All right, how about 3:20?
320. Okay. You can engage in collaboration.
Yeah.
And my sister comes in here, but she got sick.
Did she have an experience? We gotta bring a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to tell that. Yeah.
I'm sick. I got COVID. First of all, middle of August, and then I got signs of sick, and then I got pneumonia. All in a row. This man will get together. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
about 3 days. I missed about 3 days. It kind of hit where it was on the weekend.
Oh my God.
Then Bob, he fell down the stairs and burned himself.
Your mom.
And it's skin graft and he's been staying with Janet for like months. Yeah, the crazy stuff. About 2 weeks, so she was sleeping months and then she not a long story. She has a pool in fact. And the pool has a skimmer. And the skimmer has a rubber insert that goes in. And she was bringing hot boiling water downstairs with the rubber end to shrink it so it would fit in the and she tripped, and she tripped, and she fell downstairs. Unfortunately, she fell this but you see do like that face first. You know,
I would have said.
yeah, the doctor said she's lucky she didn't break anything. She ended up getting a skin graft on her arm. They took it off right there. Right there.
We shouldn't get you there.
No, he had left and got that job. Yeah,
She was by herself.
she was by herself, yeah. But she just back. My niece took her back home Saturday. So she's been there about 4 days.
But anyway.
She didn't want to go. She wanted to get out of here.
Well, I know, but.
Well, as long as we can tell her no more pool. I did. We're gonna get some. Yeah, no, I wish we could have said like now, you know, you got the kitchen and the shower upstairs. And you know, I think so. Janet thinks so. We was trying to tell her, but you know.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think eventually she ended up back down here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But you know, it's a pretty big get because stuff and all that. So. Yeah, yeah, I got years. Yeah, she was, yeah.
That's all you
Yeah, good friend, but yeah, they're church people. No, but you're right. I feel much better. Again.
Oh, she was very
Because that's, you know, a couple years ago, she broke her wrist, you know, that's, you know, kind of.
That's right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
basically. Yeah.
That's the idea. I think they got a little lazy too. Very well organized. Just ask the company. Right, doesn't fail. That thing's wrong. They're not Friday. This year. Bounds that I have is structural league, and that's one wall. Basically, that was yeah, it's asking and stuck in. There's a river. And she got the night around the street, and they got that's the problem. You can have Hi, boss.
All right, everybody. I get back to work because I'm a serious person and I'm talking about serious stuff. You know, somebody has to maintain order. All right, you're up.
You're so strict.
I am strict.
I know. I'm taking, I want to be on your side though. I'm for the people. But yeah, but he is the meaning. Yeah. No, we'll be back and understand, of course, this is a highly subjective view of the Celtic people by Julius Caesar. But again, I think it's very interesting when his mind, clearly he had, I guess what they call ADD, because he was thinking, oh God, I've got to work on my description of the Celts, but those darn, all those Pompey people, I've got to kill them. And my to-do list is rather significant. But anyway, the Gallic Wars are quite impressive. And he tells us a lot about Germanic peoples too. Now, again, I find things like this extremely interesting. I know those of you who think about really, so how, yeah, I know. You think, how do we know that these various people are in these areas? They have to sign, like we talked about, we're here and you better not come out. We'll take you to the world court. And yeah, you're going down, man. I'm not sure at all. I think it's interesting. I'll say that. Speculative, quite. But more or less, I'm thinking these boundaries are just like, come on in, you may want to visit here, but you have to leave before sunset. Because I'm definitely don't thinking there's not any kind of we love you, you're a Celt, I'm a Celt, you know. All of this territory, because I definitely don't think there were any pacifists among them. I think they were in a fairly significant state of war during most of the period, which of course was useful for the Romans. And here he is, Claudius, and you say, wow, nice outfit. Yeah. That's, of course, not his usual garb, but I think for the purpose, you know, like when you had your photograph made by Olin Mills, perhaps, you wanted to wear your best clothing, you know, Sears and Roebuck, wherever you want to shop, but he was here, I guess, dressed as a god. Oh, shucks. No, I don't think he said that. I think he basically thought, I'm a god to be. You know, it's sort of like when I die, I'll become a god, that sort of thing. But meanwhile, I just thought this was interesting with the symbols of Caesar, and I'm thinking, what would Julius have thought about Claudius? But that's not fair. Let's just assume Claudius was the emperor. And we often wonder, why would he be the one who would recommence the interest in Britain? Part of it, of course, has to do with the fiasco in Germany, which happened under Caesar Augustus after Julius Caesar. That was very, very unfortunate for the Romans. And I think after losing a legion or two, Caesar Augustus said, I have other projects and I'll pursue them. Meanwhile, so it is said, Claudius, who's an interesting figure in itself, And you wouldn't think he had a lots of dates. I mean, he went out with a lot of different people, married 4 times, and married his niece. I'm not saying not good, not good, but Nero's mother, big mistake. Yeah. So yeah,
Don't eat the figs.
Hon, I think this takes a little odd. But there's our Claudius, and quite a scholar. Now, drop this on somebody. Say, I don't know what you study, but I'm an etruscologist. And they are going to be so impressed once you explain what it is. But he was an etruscologist. I think that's so interesting. He studied Etruscan ruins. And you think, really? Yes. Little things that you never knew, but always wondered about. Who were early, where was the early interest in the Etruscans? And among them was Claudius. Because, I mean, when you're a prince, you have to have hobbies and interests. I mean, you get bored. And he wasn't a conqueror, he was a lover. Yeah. So all of that is to say, don't be fooled with his outfit. He was not going to lead the crusade to Britain himself. He is doing a lot of paperwork back at headquarters. Okay. We got to have those bureaucrats, right, in the Pentagon. We send other people to go out in the chariots, giddy up, and conquer the enemy. And that was him. And it was interesting, 18 years almost for a conquest with which happily we are able to trace the whole proceedings because of the sources we have. This is called the so-called Roman pacification. Pacification coming from, of course, the Latin word for peace. And you think, oh, how nice. We bring love and peace to the people. I don't mean that kind of pacification. I think this is broadly interpreted pacification. We're going to make you, you're going to be part of the Roman peace, and you're going to like it. And if you don't like it, yeah, you're going to get hurt, and it won't feel good. I don't think there's a lot of requesting and we know, of course, when we see this, and we're going to get into the sources shortly, but all of this going into the building and construction. Can you imagine if you were a Roman engineer, all the job work the economic opportunities, because you're thinking, when you know these Roman roads and bridges, you're not thinking all these Celts are applying. I don't think they cared about all that. I'm thinking like, wow, man, all roads lead to Britain. Yeah, because look at all the jobs. I mean, if you're a Celt, you could apply to help and be part of the staff, but I don't think you're going to be in charge. So no managerial positions would be provided to that. But I just thought that was so interesting when you think about all that building is going in. Part of it is going to be military, granted, but part of it presumably will be to bring these territories together for Roman purposes. Again, you see the various areas of Celtic interest, and I imagine, again, speculating, these various Celtic groups to the south tended to succumb to persuasion, and the ones in the north tended to say, heck no, you're going to have to take us, man. We're going to stay in the fight. Yeah. So that's what takes all the time. not so much the South, which I find interesting. Perhaps it's because Romans are coming in the South. And then I guess as you go further and further north, there are fewer and fewer people. So I guess there's less, shall we say, interest or impetus on the part of the Romans to rush it. There are, as you can see, so-called legionary forts and cannon capsules. But the major towns, many of you have been up to York, Lincoln, Gloucester, places that were really established at this time as major centers of the Romans. For military purposes, I would think initially, and then economic, ecclesiastical, as the church will come, as we'll see in a preview, in a subsequent talk. But they get up here, there's Hadrian's Wall. Some of you have been up there. God, I think they charge admissions now, but yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, there's wherever you can make $1 or a pound, I guess it's fine. All right, now, here's a sightseeing site for you. Right there along the Thames, right there in beautiful downtown London. That's where you can see that. And of course, being an empty speculator, I remember walking by there and I said, I wonder if I walked up to people and said, ma'am, do you know who that figure is? Would she call the police or would she be interested in hearing me explain? But I decided,
Sure, the latter.
yeah, probably, but I decided to keep my mouth shut for once. Because while I find it fascinating from the point of view of it's still there. I mean, I'm thinking, gosh, down in London, in the London's version of Broadway, there's a World War I nurse. But people go by these things and they're not crying out for answers. What does it mean? What's that just in my head? Yeah, you understand. But here we have somebody who is quite famous and has been the figure of, oh, what a hero, what a hero. She was one of the great Celtic queens, and she is described here as having been a victim of Roman treachery, physical abuse, and all of this, in a sense, being an example of the horrors of Roman colonialism, if you will. So it's interesting that the British government would have decided to do this. And this is a statue goes back, I imagine, 19th, early 20th century. So when you see this, you will understand how important it is. We know nothing about this family or this particular tribe except for this, which is described by another one of our great sources. And of course, that's right, the Agricola, which only means farmer in Latin. But in this case, and you see the dates with which he led the Romans, and understand he may have been called back, as sometimes successful generals are, for getting a little too popular, shall we say. But his adoring son-in-law, well, maybe adoring is wrong, very admiring son-in-law, Tacitus wrote a very famous biography of him, and that really will tell us the story of this conquest, if you want to call it that, of Britain, or that part of it, in the aegis of this particular man. He goes through the campaigns, continuing pacification, the authority, the establishment of the Roman cities, if you want to call them, fortified areas, and how it went. As I say, he would go back, and if you remember your Roman Empire history, there were lots of different rulers at that time. And again, a guy like this was probably very popular, highly regarded. And so he didn't last, but he lasted long enough. Well, 7 years, I mean, is a pretty long time for this particular campaign. And by this time, he had conquered quite a bit of it, because all the way up into, yes, you guessed it, southern Scotland, which, of course, no offense to Scotophiles, but didn't exist. It was more or less in the extreme south. That area was more or less part of the territory ruled by Celtic peoples, but it allowed them to move on. That is, the Romans. Anyway, he was a major figure there, and I thought it was very interesting to think. And this great statue, I mean, so obviously he is there. How about that? Yeah. And this is Tacitus. And Tacitus, as you may remember my talking another time about a book called The Germans, the Germania, which makes him one of the major Roman sources, and somebody you would have to read if you're taking Latin, advanced Latin classes. And you can get it in a Penguin, maybe even a used copy if you're trying to pinch pennies. But more or less, it's to understand he is a great historian, but not necessarily what we would call objective. And I don't blame him. I mean, it's his father-in-law. We all have Thanksgiving to deal with. We understand it's very important to have good family relations. And he admired him, and he had a lot of ugly things to say about Domitian. And you say, wow, the constitutional amendments in action, freedom of the press. I think he waited for him to die first. And then it comes out, yeah, the real truth about Domitian. And Domitian was not a nice person. So it's not like there's some sort of Domitian fan club, people saying, oh, Domitian revisionism, saying he's gotten a bad rap. No. And Domitian is the one who was basically, according to Tacitus, jealous, and so removed Agricola from his position. And again, we are right there in the period, sort of, if you've heard of that, the golden age of the Roman Empire, the 5 good emperors and all of that. Oh, everything is just peachy keen, and it's great to be a Roman. I love the empire, and all of that. Just to understand this particular period and how significant it is in terms of British history, because the Agricola lets us understand how very significant it is. I couldn't resist doing these quotations because I often ask students, I said, Do you think they had a tape recorder there or somebody? How do you think they know exactly what they said? But that takes a little thinking on their part. And like it's a you think they kind of made it up? And I said, yeah, I think we're getting there. You understand? I don't want to hurt them, but I want them to be realistic here. What it means is, what would some sort of Scottish British leader have said? This is way up north now. It's cold, and I guess there's sheep all around. And you don't want to mess with them. And it's not like there's a lot going on, okay? It's a real quiet area. So if you're up in the area, you're thinking Calgacus, who was the leader of these Roman forces, kind of, what was that movie, Kate and Ellie? I mean, it's like, we have nothing to lose. Let's go for it. That's what they did. So that's beginning. Again, Tacitus is writing this from his villa in suburban Rome. So I don't think he's not there, but he could imagine. You get the idea of, to us, slavery is a thing unknown because they hadn't gotten there. There's no land beyond us because it's way up north. The sea, even the sea is not safe. Menaced as we are by a Roman fleet. So it's always not hard to imagine how it would feel to people like this who are under this kind of pressure. Because, I mean, if you were having some sort of a Caledonian pep rally, I mean, you gotta say, it's not like, gosh, I wonder what kind of strategy we should use here. Could you say, or like my student, I'm stressed out? Yeah, I think if you're going to be stressed out, this is the time because the Romans are coming. And when they get here, it is not going to be pleasant because we resisted. Now, however, the furthest limits of Britain are thrown open. The unknown always passes for the marvelous. No tribes beyond us. We're it. You know, the limit's been reached. Nothing but waves and rocks. If you've been up there, he isn't lying. You don't need, that's just the truth. The yet more terrible Romans, boo, hiss, right? They're the bad guys. Whose oppression, escape is vainly sought by obedience and submission. But we like to be free. We're just regular folks. Alone among men, they covet with equal eagerness poverty and riches. Think about that. How could you do that? Well, they want to make us poor and them rich. Yeah, which is kind of ugly. But that's what they to robbery, slaughter, plunder, they give the lying name of empire. They make a desert and they call it peace. In other words, this guy was no supporter of the Roman Empire. Not like he's going to put on I love empire. It's like more, this is really not what we should be doing. We should just be sort of enjoying what we have. And again, we might find that a bit odd considering whose son-in-law he was and how he was part of this empire. But that phrase, the peace that was really a desert, is really come down in history as one of the trademarks of this establishment of Roman civilization there, because of what did Stalin say about to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. So truly, Calgacus is one of the people who will be affected, as well many others. So this is kind of the last of the bunch who will lose out on this. And when he does, that is to say, the last of the tribes that will be conquered, it will be a decision that they will have to make, somewhat reluctantly, I guess, to stop, because you could go on. I mean, we all love the Highlands and going on up there. And I always say, if you get to see the sun once a day, you've had a good day, because it's not coming back until tomorrow. If there, and it's beautiful. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, if you want sun, go to Miami. This is the Highlands had its own kind of beauty. But the Romans, I kept thinking about how they were and how they must have adapted to this. And I'm sure, like all colonizers and occupiers, they made some friends, maybe false friends, maybe not true friends. Yeah. But word for the day, sycophants. There were plenty of those who said, gosh, I thought you'd never get here. We have really waited for you. You're so wonderful. We've heard about your civilization, and we can't wait till you build. Speaking of building, I mean, we love building in this town, don't we? So they couldn't get enough construction, right? Construction job, just joking. But you understand, can you imagine all those engineers that were coming to Britain after it was conquered? Well, they would wait to conquer, because a lot of them would civilians and not into military, but some engineers, I suppose, were military. But there was a lot of work to be done as time went on. And it is remarkable when you think about it, because actually, how long will it go? 4th century BC. And of course, you say, oh my gosh, you mean Constantine? I know you're getting excited already. But in the interest of self-control, we will begin there next time. Thank you all very much. Great first day. I appreciate it.